So this past week, we talked about two different types of variables. We talked about categorical variables, and we also talk about numerical variables. So given some sort of data set, like this one, we can easily identify the numerical and the categorical variables. So for example, gender here is going to be a categorical variable, whereas shoe size will probably be a numerical variable. So one of the things that we really want to be able to do is try to visualize what exactly is going on with each individual column, because it's kind of hard to see the column and we don't want to count all this. So here are three different types of graphs for categorical variables. So the first one is a frequency table. Now, when I talk about these types of variables, the first thing that I'm going to try to talk about is I'm going to say distribution a lot, and the distribution is just basically the visualization of the graph. So just what does a graph look like, or what does a function look like? I'm basically talking about the distribution. Okay, so distribution is just a listing or function showing all the possible values or intervals of the data and how often they occur. So basically, what is the graph? Distribution is the same thing as a graph or a listing. So the most quick and easy way to do it is just with the frequency table. Frequency table is just a table of counts. So for example, we asked 40 people to tell us what is their highest degree. So this 20, for example, tells us that there's 20 people who have a highest degree of an MBA. Okay, so then this whole column will just represent, it's just going to tally your table, how much of that category we have. Now this one right here is the relative frequency. Now relative frequency, all it is just this number, the frequency, divided by the total. So this 20 divided by 40, if you put it in your calculator, you will get 0.5. That's the relative frequency. So if you take all these numbers like this 2 and divide it by 40, then you'll get this 0.05 and so on and so forth. You multiply it by 100 and you get your percentage. Okay, so this is just a very quick and easy way to kind of see what the distribution of the data is. So that's one way. Now I wrote down here how to do it on StatCrunch. So I listed out the steps. So you're going to click on Stat, Tables, Frequency, select the column variable, and compute. So let's just do that really quickly. And I did it for every single graph, so you can play around with it. So first thing you want to do is click on Stat. Then we're going to click on Tables, Frequency. Okay, I'm going to choose Gender. Okay, and then notice that here you have frequency and relative frequency is already highlighted. So let me click Compute. And there you go. It tells you first, the count tells you how many total people you have, and then it tells you the column of each individual label, so female and male, the frequency, how many of them there are, and then it tells you the relative frequency. And if you wanted to find the percentage, you can just multiply that one by 100. So you get 57 approximately, and the other one 42.5. Okay? So that's the easiest way that you can display this data. That's the frequency table. Now, the next thing that you kind of want to consider, so let's say you are more of a visual person and you don't really want the table of values, but instead you want something completely visual, then the next thing that you would want to look at is maybe a bar plot. So if you can't quite see the table and you want to see something much more visual, then a bar plot is what you want to go to. So a bar plot shows bars for each category on the x-axis and the frequency on the y-axis. So let me zoom in a little bit because I know it's really hard to see. But the x-axis here tells you that this is the movie genre of these people. Like what do they like? They like action, drama, horror, romantic comedy, or science fiction. Now, I have two different y-axes. This one is the frequency, and you can see here that this is the frequency, so how often they occur. So if you look at drama, it seems like it's 5 people. Okay, now this one is relative frequency. Okay, so now it's everything divided by the 54. So you take that 5, so you got 5 people divided by 54, you're going to get the percentage, which is almost less than 10% or 0.1. Okay, so it's basically the same graph. Notice that the graphs didn't really change. It's just that your y-axis are now in terms of relative frequency. Okay, so that's another way that you can plot a categorical variable using bar plots. Okay, so so now let me go ahead and zoom in if this lets me zoom in. So there you can go ahead and play around with this. Here's the StatCrunch steps to do it. So you can go ahead and do that if you want to. And then the last one, which a lot of you guys may know, and some of you guys said it in class, are pie charts. So pie charts is basically this circle that's sliced into several pieces, and each piece represents a category of the variable. So if you see, it's the same exact categories as the previous bar plot, but the only thing is that now it's broken up into slices. Now this thing is what we call a legend, right? It tells you the color of each individual item, tells you the frequency, and it also tells you the percentages of each of them. So that's something that you can also take a look at. So pie charts can be really misleading though, so just be very aware of that. Just be very careful. Okay, so so those are the three different types for categorical variables. So let's do a quick example. Now before let me just tell you really quickly about misleading graphs, and you'll see this later. Notice that you have two different graphs here. You have graph number 1, and you also have graph number 2. These two graphs are exactly the same, okay? But one of them is misleading. And you see this in the internet all the time. So just be very, very aware. You have pizza, hot dogs, and hamburgers, and you're trying to figure out what is their favorite food of some people, I guess. So if you notice here, pizza here says about between 970 and 975 like pizza, whereas hot dogs between 985 to 990 and hamburgers 955. Now if you look at all of this, notice that this is 955, right? This is about 955. This is about 973 maybe, and this is about 987. Okay, notice that they're not far apart. These are all basically the same, but 955 compared to 973, you know, there's only a little bit of difference. But if you look at the area of the entire, or the height of this bar, this is almost twice as large as this little guy. And you can see that in the numbers, that's not quite, you know, correct. So this is misleading. It's not telling you anything at all. It's just telling you that people tend to like hot dogs and pizza way more than hamburgers, but the numbers say otherwise. It's not even, they're basically all the same. And if you look at graph number 2, you can see that actually they all are basically around the same. There actually is no preference. So you want to be very careful with these misleading graphs. Look at the y-axis and see if there really is a difference or not. Okay, so I'll stop right there. In the next video, I'm going to do an example of a categorical variable, and then we'll talk about the numericals. Okay.